All right, class. So moving on to synapse. Now, how do we define a synapse? A synapse is when a motor neuron lies in very close proximity to another neuron or a muscle fiber or a gland. So let's say this is a motor neuron. So these are motor neurons that I'm drawing. Oops. Okay. And when a motor neuron is super close proximity to a muscle, that's a synapse. When a motor neuron is in very close proximity to another neuron, this is another synapse. And the motor neuron can also be in very close proximity to a gland. That's another synapse. So, a synapse is defined when one motor neuron lies in very close proximity to either another neuron or a muscle fiber or a gland. We call that a synapse. Okay. Now, one neuron, when we have two neurons in the pathway, right? We have neuron number 1, neuron number 2. Now, the upstream neuron is called the presynaptic neuron. This is called, presynaptic neuron. And this will be called, obviously, postsynaptic neuron. Sometimes the presynaptic is also called upstream neuron, and therefore the postsynaptic will be called downstream neuron. Okay. All right. And how do neurons communicate with each other? Well, let's say this is a postsynaptic neuron, and the presynaptic neuron can actually, and these are the dendrites, okay? The presynaptic neuron can actually talk to the dendrites, and when the presynaptic neuron synapses on the dendrites of the postsynaptic neuron, we call this dendritic synapse, meaning the axon of the presynaptic neuron is synapsing with the dendrite of the postsynaptic neuron. All right. In another case, we can have a postsynaptic neuron, and the presynaptic neuron is synapsing to the soma or the cell body. Excuse me, class. Yes. Nangu, I'm very busy, Mama. Give me 5 minutes, okay? Okay. All right. So here we have the presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron, and the presynaptic neuron is synapsing on the cell body or soma of the postsynaptic neuron, and in this case, this is called axosomatic synapse. All right, so this was case number 1, case number 2. The third scenario is when you have a downstream neuron and the upstream neuron is actually talking or synapsing to the axon of the postsynaptic cell. And this is called axoaxonic synapse. So as we can see, synapse can be of different types. Now, the most common one is axodendritic, which is number 1. This is the most common type. And also, I want to tell you, synapse can be electrical or chemical. Now, before we go into the chemical or electrical synapse, another thing I would like to talk to you about. Now, we always draw this, right? Presynaptic neuron talking to a postsynaptic neuron. But I want you to understand this. Things are not this simple in our body, okay? It's not only one neuron talking to another. No, it's not like that. There can be many neurons talking to just one downstream one. And here everybody, all the upstream neurons, so these are presynaptic or upstream ones. Okay, so as you can see, the presynaptic neurons, we have so many presynaptic neurons talking to one postsynaptic neuron. And in this case, we have neuronal convergence. Now, on the other hand, we can have one presynaptic neuron. So this is a presynaptic neuron. And one presynaptic neuron can actually talk to many postsynaptic neurons. And these are the postsynaptic neurons. And this is an example of neuronal divergence. Neuronal divergence. Okay, really important concept, because we will talk about this when we explain graded potential. Okay, so again, it is not always one neuron talking to another neuron. Sorry, we can have a lot of neurons talking to one postsynaptic neuron, or we can have just one presynaptic neuron talking to many postsynaptic neurons. In the first case, we call it neuronal convergence, and in the second case, we call it neuronal divergence. Now let's look at types of synapse. Types of synapse. Synapse can be mainly of two types. We have electrical and chemical. Electrical synapses are easy. Now, in case of electrical synapse, we have cells attached to each other by their plasma membrane. So the cells are in physical contact with each other. And connecting the cells, we have these channels. These are called gap junctions. These are called what? Gap junctions. Therefore, if the cells are connected to each other by gap junctions and their plasma membranes are fused, in case of electrical synapses, their plasma membranes are fused to each other. So, will there be cytoplasmic connection between the cells? Yes, there will be. And via these gap junctions, ions can flow from one cell to the next. Superfast process, electrical synapse. In which parts of the body do we find electrical synapse? Well, we find some in the central nervous system, but mostly electrical synapses are found in smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, etc. Okay, so we find it in the CNS, but mostly in the smooth muscles and cardiac muscles. Moving on to chemical synapse, and it will be a lot of drawing. Okay, all right. I will escape. I will just draw it like this. Okay. Actually, I'll start with a new video.